Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast Network. This week, as football season is wrapping up, Tennessee will be hosting Vanderbilt in Neyland Stadium. So we are joined by my friend from the Vandy Hustler, Andrew. Andrew, why don't you just introduce yourself and kind of tell us what y'all are doing at the Hustler right now?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. Vanderbilt Hustler is the longest standing newspaper in the state of Tennessee. It's been here since the 1800s. It is quite a historic organization. And working for Vanderbilt Hustler Sports behind the likes of Simon Gibbs, Justin Hershey, and Bryce Smith has been such an honor and such a privilege. They really set the standard. And my goal this year was just to continue the tradition of great storytelling they did. Vanderbilt football hasn't had the best season, but we've worked with that and we've made great stories from that, from talking about features and basketball seasons right along the way. Vanderbilt soccer was unfortunately unable to make the NCAA tournament, but again, always finding ways to find cool stories and player profiles and ways for the students and for our fans to be involved and enjoy sports.
Yeah, so you mentioned the football season there for a second, so let's dive right into that. First thing, I was listening to Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee talk today.
Yeah.
The program has kind of had, winless in the SEC. I know the athletic director said that Clark Lee will keep his job, but she wants to see better things moving forward.
Yeah.
Where would you say this program is at right now for Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to talk to athletic director Candace Story-Lee about 2 weeks ago, 2 Wednesdays ago. And the thing is that she's seen is Vanderbilt football regressed maybe statistically. They had 5 wins last season, and they're probably going to have 2 wins this season. But when I asked, hey, how would you analyze the regression statistically? She said, I'm not going to view it like that. She related Vanderbilt football to her 7 knee surgeries she's had. And she said, healing isn't linear, and healing in this case is this season and recovering and rebuilding. And it's rebuilding a culture. And I think Clark Lee will get another year or two of opportunity. There were some games early in the season that really ended up biting Vanderbilt, such as the UNLV game where A.J. Swan and the offense had a lot of costly turnovers, and the Wake Forest game when there were a lot of costly turnovers. I think Vanderbilt might have gotten they played Kentucky and Florida in really, really nice times for them. They had a lot of momentum going. And there's been such a quarterback conundrum. I'm sure we're going to be talking about it later in the podcast, but A.J. Swan starts for the first 5 games. Midway through the Kentucky game, he ends up being sidelined after suffering an elbow contusion, which he had the week prior. So there's just been things that haven't gone Vanderbilt's way. And then defensively, still unable to really have much of a rush defense and really unable to put any pressure on the quarterback.
Do you think with Clark Lee, obviously you said they've regressed statistically, do you think he can turn this program around moving forward from a 2-win season this year, maybe to next year or the 2 years that the athletic director will give him?
Yeah, I do. I think the hard thing with Vanderbilt is they're not in an even playing field, right? It's not like the NFL or the NHL where there's a salary cap. Every SEC team has its own entity. And it just seems like Vanderbilt football isn't getting the same type of recruits as the other SEC teams. So on paper and the roster, it's not nearly as competitive, and there are probably academic requirements that come for these student athletes to come to Vanderbilt out of high school that makes it really hard for Clark Lee and the coaching staff to be getting really truly the best players. And then also it takes a while for culture and things to come around. Reminder, Vanderbilt did not have the easiest schedule. Playing Georgia. Only lost to 17 by Georgia, which was, I would argue, Vanderbilt's best game. But when you're losing to South Carolina, who was the 12th or 13th best team in the SEC by more than 40 points, that's just unacceptable. And what I'm going to look for this weekend is Vanderbilt to show that they haven't given up. And I don't know if they've given up. I'm not in the locker room. No one knows. But from what I've seen, it just seems like 28 missed tackles against the Ole Miss game. Just doing the things you can control and just trying to play your brand of football.
Yeah, so let's dive in more on the field this year. You talked about A.J. Swan struggling to run the offense, and then you've kind of had that QB conundrum. Clark Lee did not name a starting quarterback today. Who do you think starts on Saturday, and then what do those two guys kind of bring to the mix?
Yeah, it'll likely be Ken Seals Sr. He was the starter in 2020 when Vanderbilt was 0-9. Remember that year was just SEC play. 2021, He was the starter along with Mike Wright, who's now the starter at Mississippi State, replacing Will Rogers, who has an injury. 2022, Ken Seals gets demoted to third string behind A.J. Swan and Mike Wright. And now it's kind of been a full circle moment. I wrote a feature about him. He's back starting for the Commodores, but everyone knows what Ken Seals is going to give you. He will not lose a game for you, but he's not going to win it. A.J. Swan is more talented. He's a better deep ball. He has an ability to really galvanize a team, but he threw some really, really rough interceptions early in the season that led to Ken Seals, in my opinion, getting that starting position. And also, Swan is still nursing that elbow contusion. Seals against South Carolina had no interceptions, but he only had 104 passing yards. Clark Lee said, "It's nice that our quarterback gave us a chance to punt." Is that your goal in the SEC? No. And that's that's the issue right now. The goal is to punt. That's a very defensive way to play. So the question is, who's going to start? I think Ken Seals. Walter Taylor isn't quite developed as a passer yet. He played for most of the Ole Miss game. He's quite a dual threat guy. I see a lot of opportunities to put him in a jet sweep, a two quarterback offense, kind of like Tim Tebow did with the Jets and Eagles back in the NFL, or you see Taysom Hill doing it with the Saints. I see that type of offense, but Ken Seals getting the majority of the snaps.
I want to dive into that. You talked about that Taysom Hill kind of specialty package, specialty offense. Do you think Vanderbilt will ever reach a point where they can try to beat SEC teams doing the same thing that other SEC teams are doing? Like you see the military academies kind of run a wing T or a triple option. Do you think Vanderbilt will have to switch it up to kind of compete consistently in the SEC?
Well, I don't know if it's that, but I do think there has been a lack of creativity on the offensive end this season, particularly. Last year, you had Ray Davis, who ended up having 1,000 yards. For everyone that doesn't know, Ray Davis is the running back now for Kentucky, and he's been killing it. He's been on a tear, and it just shows how solid he was. And Mike Wright was also a dual threat quarterback, and it confused SEC defenses. I think now you were asking offensively, will they need to be doing more gimmicky stuff for there to be creativity? I know that I am almost certain Joey Lynch, the offensive coordinator, hasn't been playing this well this season. I was going to say I think he's going to be fired, but I don't know. All the Vanderbilt insiders think he's going to go just because of the lack of creativity and lack of progress that the offense has had. But I do really think it is exciting that, and you hope that Vanderbilt's going to be playing just a little bit harder, because I know that there is a rivalry against Tennessee, and I know you've gotten our better hand the past few years, but it's still always fun when you play a state rival. When you look at basketball, we beat you guys number 6 in basketball. We were definitely the underdogs, but there is a lot of excitement happening on West End right now as we look forward to play Tennessee. I know we're heavy underdogs, but you never know what can happen.
Yeah, I want to dive into Vanderbilt's winless in the SEC, and a lot of fans can just kind of overlook Vanderbilt. What would you say would be Vanderbilt's strong suit? What would they have to do correctly to win on Saturday?
Thank you for that question. I know I'm getting a lot of questions right now the past few months, and it's negative. And I want Vanderbilt to be winning games, and I'm not a Vanderbilt fan. I'm a student reporter, but I think it'd be exciting, and the stories would be maybe a little bit more compelling if Vanderbilt would be winning upsets. Vanderbilt's punter, Matthew Hayval, has been a strong suit. 2 reasons. 1, he's getting a lot of reps and opportunities to punt the ball. But 2, he had a 71-yard punt against Hawaii. He's on the Ray Guy, which is like the Ray Guy award watch list, which is the best punter in college football. He might win that award, and I know it's not the best thing to say our punter has been the most exciting thing, but he really has been the bright spot. And he's going to the best school in the SEC to be a punter because he's getting so many opportunities. I also look at receiver Will Shepherd. He is a red zone threat. I see a lot of NFL possibility in him, and he's a guy that is very, very solid. He had 2 touchdowns in every game for the first 3 games, and he's been really exciting. And then defensively, how can you not look at Langston Patterson? He's on a tear. He's always on the field. You can always see him. He's always there making tackles, and he had a really nice interception against Ole Miss. So those are 3 guys that I would look for this weekend.
So the punter being the first one, obviously, probably embodies what Vanderbilt's season has been like this year. But what would you think on the opposite end would be the weakest link of this team, or kind of their Achilles heel?
Secondary. defensively secondary. I mean, B.J. Anderson struggled with an injury. Ricky Wright struggled with an ankle injury midway through the season. Tyson Russell's been on and off. C.J. Taylor's been a bright spot, but the secondary isn't there. You lose key guys from last year, such as Maxwell Worship and Jeremy Lucien on the back end. And although Jalen Mahoney's still back there, you still see a lot of key missed tackles. You look at that big receiver from Missouri and South Carolina; those are the two best receivers in the SEC. Tore Vanderbilt up, and it's been a hard season for the secondary. I would not say it has anything to do with coaching, but I would just say on paper that when you're not putting pressure on the quarterback, when you're allowing the teams to run for 5-6 yards and have 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3 opportunities, you have a lot of opportunities for a big shot. So I'd say it's more on the personnel defensively in the back end than the coaching, just from a schematic secondary point of view.
The Jimmies and Joes and not the X's and O's for Vanderbilt secondary, it sounds like. Now, Vanderbilt kind of had a unique opportunity this past week to be off and have a bye week because they played that week 0 game.
Yeah.
What do you think about that bye week? Do you think it's good going into this Tennessee game, or do you kind of take the approach that it sounded like Clark Lee might have said, where it might mess up the team's rhythm going into the final game of the year?
Well, there was no rhythm when you lost to South Carolina, so I don't know if I would agree or disagree with. I don't know if he said it like that. I think he's more saying that it's nice to get in the rhythm of game week. Maybe it's Thanksgiving. There's other. I think that they're pretty focused on the task at hand, and they really want to put up a good showing. Last season, I think maybe he's saying that because they had such a great win against Florida, and then it's a bye week, and then you're playing Tennessee. I think last season, you'd argue you don't want a bye week, but this season, I don't think it matters if you have a bye week or not. And I'm actually confident Vanderbilt doesn't lose by as much to Tennessee as it did last year.
What makes you confident, and kind of, I guess, go ahead and give us your score prediction for Saturday. What makes you confident the Commodores won't lose as much as they did last year?
Wait, so what do you know the spread for the game yet? I haven't checked.
A lot, I'm sure. I'll check. But why don't you dive into what makes you so confident? It looks like it is at, oh Lord. Looks like 25.5. 27.5.
I don't know if we're covering that, but I think we lost by 40 last year.
Yeah, probably.
I'm gonna guess Tennessee 42, Vanderbilt 10. And I see a late game touchdown, maybe a garbage time touchdown. Tennessee really controls the game. I just want to say one thing. I've had so much fun covering this team. It's been such an honor, and covering Vanderbilt athletics. They might not be winning every game, but I do really think Clark Lee is a great man for the program. I just have one thing to say. When I traveled with the team to Hawaii last year, he went up to everyone on the plane and shook everyone's hand. 300 people on the plane. He didn't have to shake my hand. He didn't have to shake other people's hand, but just to show how much he cared. And he's really the right man for the job. I know the statistics don't show that, but if you're patient, I do think he's not the issue, but maybe offensive coordinator Joey Lynch and getting a new quarterback, getting a new offense will change a lot of things. Maybe a quarterback in the transfer portal as well.
Your score prediction was a lot farther off than mine. I said 36-14 because this Tennessee offense has been pretty questionable. So I don't know if they'd be able to score. I mean, you got to think that they played Austin P, UTSA, and yeah, but even like when they played their cupcake games, their UTSA, their Austin P, they didn't get to that 40, 50-point mark like you'd expect this Tennessee offense to do like they did last year.
Right, but I think Tennessee really cares about securing a decent bowl game, and they're ranked, and they want to show they deserve to be ranked, and they're barely ranked. Also playing in Neyland, last home game of the year, there's something extra there. So all those, Austin P, those type of games, yeah, I mean, it might be sold out, but I don't know how hard Joe Milton is playing that game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And that also kind of gives way into my next question. Do you think this Tennessee Vanderbilt game let's stick to the football field, because I think there is an argument that basketball is a rivalry, because Vanderbilt and Tennessee on the basketball court have been pretty competitive recently. In football, I know Clark Lee talked about it a little bit as well. What do you think about this Vanderbilt-Tennessee rivalry? Do you think you can classify it a rivalry moving forward?
I think you can classify a rivalry at all, because rivalry is more about the history than the recent competitiveness. Sure, you guys have been more competitive the past few years, but let's not forget the Jay Cutler days and the Jordan Matthews days and the years we beat you guys behind uh, Coach Franklin, and there have been years where Vanderbilt have beaten Tennessee. I think you have to look at rivalry beyond the 21st century, and rivalries always ebb and flow. I think it would just be disrespectful to the rivalry to say it's not a rivalry because it's been going on for hundreds of years. Um, Maybe right now Tennessee Georgia is a more exciting and more compelling and more neck and neck battle. But you look at how Vanderbilt Tennessee hate each other on the baseball field. See about the way Vanderbilt really Tyron Lawrence had that buzzer beater against Tennessee last year, and everyone stormed the court. There's still something there, and that's something that's how I would look at it.
All right, Andrew, as we wrap up, one last thing for you. If there's maybe a stat or something on Saturday that could give Vanderbilt an upset bid, what do you think that would have to be?
If Vanderbilt has more rushing yards than Tennessee, Vanderbilt the first few games other than Hawaii and Alabama A&M, I think there's a 5-game stretch where they didn't amass 100 yards on the ground.
Awesome. Easy enough. Andrew, once again, I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you plug your social media and the
Yeah,
Hustler one more time
totally.
and everything y'all are doing?
Yeah, Vanderbilt Hustler Sports on Twitter, and then Andrew_Wilf on Twitter. Thank you so much, or should I say X? Thank you so much for listening and having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Andrew. For Andrew, Andrew's this way. I'm Caleb. This is another production of the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast Network.